Well, hey there, it's Catherine. Thanks for joining me for this video. So the three cards we're going to make in this video all have a love theme and heat embossed accents. We're going to use the Voyage Stamp Set and the Accoutrement dies, as well as Be Mine, It's a Girl, Blackjack, and Twilight. I die cut this love die. This is a hand-lettered sentiment, and I think it's just gorgeous. And I also cut out some of the images from the die set, and I wanted to use the message in a bottle stamp. So I just stamped the image right on top of the die cut in Be Mine ink. And I think this looks really cute on the card like this. You actually could leave it like that and have a really clean and simple card. We're going to dress it up a little bit though. We're going to do the compass, the love compass in blackjack on the background. And then I got a little smudge on my message in a bottle. So I die cut and stamped another one. And then that gives me a thicker die cut, which sometimes I really like the look of that on a card. Instead of just adding foam tape on the back, just doubling up your die cut adds some fun dimension. So this love sentiment, we are going to dress up. This is going to be our embossed accents piece. So I'm taking it and I'm dabbing it onto my Wow embossing pad. This is a tacky ink and it gives something for the embossing powder to hold on to. So I'm going to cover it with the Wanderlust embossing glitter. This is a clear embossing powder with a gorgeous glitter in it. It's a clear glitter and it has a little bit of gold sparkle in there. So I'm going to heat set it, and embossing glitter like this is kind of hard to figure out when it's cooked. So I like to hold my whatever piece I'm embossing, I like to hold it in the light and kind of move it back and forth a little. And then you'll be able to see which parts are still powdery and which parts are shiny, and then you know when it's done. So I'm going to embellish this a little more. So I have Turkish Nights embossing glitter, which is a gorgeous gold with some purple glitter in it. I just shook a little bit out into the lid, and then I heated up my embossed love die again so that it was nice and wet, and I just sprinkled that embossing glitter over the top. I fell in love with the result here. It's this clear, gorgeous sparkle with just a hint of color in it, and it looks really spectacular in person. Well, I wanted to do some more, so I let this dry, and then I dabbed it onto my Wow embossing pad again, and then I just covered it in clear embossing powder. This is going to really amp up the shine factor here. And I ended up doing this multiple times. I think in all, I did it 3 times. If you are quick after you emboss or heat emboss and it's still wet, you can dip it right back into your embossing powder. If you wait too long and it dries, that's fine. You can just dab it right on top of that embossing pad again and get it all tacky and dip it into your embossing powder, and you'll be good to go. So do that as many times as you want to get a nice thick coating of that clear embossing powder. And what you're going to end up with is an accent piece for your card making projects that is glossy and thick and shiny and just gorgeous. So let's finish off this card. I decided I wanted to do some layering here, so I grabbed my Postage stamp dies and I die cut that front piece where I had the stamping. I'm going to add Sending, which is a sentiment from the Bon Voyage stamp set. I had a little stamping error there and didn't quite complete that G, so I just grabbed a micron pen and finished that off. And then I want a Be Mine piece of cardstock behind that. So I just took my ink pad, did direct to paper on my layer, and now I have a Be Mine piece of cardstock. I die cut that with the stitched rectangle that comes in the Postage stamp set of dies. It's 1 size larger than the Postage stamp. And then I'm going to layer all of these pieces together onto a white card base. I'm using Nuvo liquid glue to adhere all my pieces together, the little message in the bottle and the love. And then I'll finish it off with a few sequins from our Inspiration Point sequin mix, which is a gorgeous mix of sparkling clear, cream flowers, and some different shades of pink. Perfect for Valentine's Day cards. So here's a look at the final product. Leave me a comment. Let me know what embossing powders you have in your stash that you might try mixing like I did here. Now for the second card with heat embossed accents, we're going to use the Perfect Blend Stamp Set in dies, a 3-inch circle, our large Doily Die, and our color palette is Sangria, Stone Blue, Pink Champagne, Over Coffee, and Icing on the Cake. So I die cut the coffee cups first, and I'm just going to stamp them with Pink Champagne and Stone Blue. I also die cut the coffee beans, so I'm going to stamp those and set them aside to use on the card later. And then I'm going to use Over Coffee to stamp as the inside of the coffee cup. So there is my cup of joe. And then for the accents, our ink stays a little bit damp or kind of wet for a little while. So you want to make sure that it's completely dry before embossing little images on top of a stamped image. So I took my deactivator tool and just wiped it down to make sure that it's all dry and there's no wetness left. And then I'm going to stamp these fun little kind of mid-century mod images on the cups in the center in the Wow embossing ink. And then I'm going to use rose gold embossing powder. One thing I love about this embossing powder is it has a little bit of a variegated look in it when you emboss it, and you'll see that in a minute. So I'm just going to pour that on top of the images and heat set it. I never get tired of watching an image get heat embossed. I think these cups would also look gorgeous if they were totally embossed with this rose gold. It's such a gorgeous color, and it I don't know, it goes perfectly with these cups. So I'll just set those aside for a minute, and I'm going to work on the circle treatment. I'm going to stamp the main sentiment here, Perfect Blend, right in the center of the circle. And then I'm going to stamp Me and You in Sangria, and then add a couple little hearts on either side of the sentiment. I love this little heart. It's so tiny. And the sentiment here, the Me and You, was created to kind of just bend around that perfect blend. Stick a pin in this for a second because I'm going to come back to this. The coffee cups kind of covered it up, so we'll revisit that in a second. But in the meantime, we're going to do the background, and I thought this polka dot background, it's called Doin the Polka, would be perfect. And so I just stamped it in my embossing ink and then poured the rose gold over it. There's a couple spots where maybe my Wow embossing pad wasn't inky enough, although I did use my little freestyle tool to re-ink it. When you're doing a big, bold image with embossing powder, you want to make sure that your pad is really, really juicy. So I did stamp this a couple times. Luckily, I used my MISTI, so I could just put it right back in the MISTI and stamp again. So I die cut another circle because that perfect blend wasn't working for me with the coffee cups because it covered up the Me and You, and I didn't think I stamped it very well. So I'm just going to do it again. And I put my coffee cups on there first so I could figure out where I wanted it to go. And then I thought it would be fun to do the Me and You and the hearts all the way around the center, or all the way around the outside of the circle. So I worked on lining it up and making it go around the outside of the center a little better than the first time. And the result, it was something that I was really happy with. I think it looks really super cute. And I think mounting this on our large doily die is absolute perfection because isn't it nice to be served a cup of coffee or a cup of tea on a doily? I think it goes hand in hand. So I'll do the little squiggle line, stamp it in Over Coffee for some steam coming out of that coffee cup. I'm going to use some foam mounting tape to give some dimension between that circle and the doily. And then I'm just going to adhere my coffee cups onto the circle. And I think this little circle with the doily and the coffee cups, I think it looks so cute. There's actually a lot of ways you can finish this card off. You could do some stenciling on a background. You could do a white die cut cover plate on a white card base. You could just do a white card base, period. But I wanted to do this polka dot background. Actually, I'm realizing I did this opposite. So you already saw me stamping this polka dot background, and now I'm doing it again. Actually, what you're seeing here is the first time I stamped it, and what you saw previously was the second time I stamped it. But you guys get the idea no matter which order you see it in. So I ended up really loving this polka dot background with the rose gold embossing powder. Looks really beautiful. So now I'm going to take all of my bits and pieces and layers and assemble them into a card. So this card layer is 4 by 5 1/4. We're going to add that to a card front. If you haven't checked out our shop, we have card bases already done for you. So they're cut. They're 8.5 by 11 cardstock cut in half, scored in half. So it's really easy just to grab those and make your card bases. So that's what I use in my videos. And then just add that doily piece on top, and then we'll finish it off with a few inspiration point sequins. And here is a look at the final card, and I'm really excited about it. I love the little embossed details on here. So for our final card, we're going to use the Doodle Heart Stamp Set, Crater Lake sequins, couple circle dies, some Flirty Fuchsia ink, and the Embossing Trio, as well as an ink refill in the Grape Crush ink. So first of all, I'm going to make a little watercolor palette. So I'm using our round block, and I just took my ink refill and squeezed some out onto the block. And then I have a piece of watercolor cardstock. So the first thing I'm doing is spraying it with my Ken Oliver water bottle and just making a nice little puddle in the middle of the cardstock. And then I'm just dipping and dabbing some Flirty Fuchsia ink onto it. Just kind of letting the water and the ink do its thing and kind of move around where it wants to go. And then there were some like splatters going on there, which I thought were really cool. So I just flicked my brush onto it and added some more. I actually need to correct myself. The ink refill I used was Pixie Dust, not Flirty Fuchsia. I think it looks gorgeous on this watercolor piece. So the next step, while I set the technique piece aside to dry, I'm going to work on a little accent piece for the card. So I have my Doodle Heart Stamp Set. I'm stamping it on white cardstock. You can use watercolor cardstock or white cardstock. And I'm just using the ink from my lid and my blender pen. A blender pen is basically a clear marker, so you can dip it into your ink. You can also take your ink pad, dab it onto an acrylic block, and use that as your color palette. So many ways you can use your blender pens like markers with all of your ink colors. Then when you want to switch colors, you just scribble it off on scratch paper. Be gentle so that you'll save the tip of your blender pen. If you push down too hard, you'll fray it. So these doodle heart images are pretty small, so they're really super easy to color in. When you're using regular white cardstock, you want to be careful not to go over the same spot too many times. Your cardstock will start to pill if you do that. If you want more freedom and to be able to go over the same spot a lot, you might want to use watercolor cardstock. So I'm just doing Flirty Fuchsia for the flower and then a little bit of Grape Crush for the heart. And I'm just kind of going heavier in some areas, mostly around the edges, adding in some shading. And I had a lot of fun coloring in this heart. It was really relaxing. And then I'm just going to take my cutter bee scissors and cut out the heart. I find if you keep your scissors still and move the cardstock or the image that you're cutting out, it's a little bit easier to control. So next up, I want to do my heat embossed accent. So I took 2 circle dies, the sizes that are next to each other, and I cut out a frame. And then I'm dabbing that onto my Wow embossing pad. And I'm going to use my Flirty Fuchsia embossing trio. So the first powder there is called Wink, and it's Flirty Fuchsia embossing powder. And then we have embossing glitter. And then the last one is full on glitter. No embossing powder in there at all, so you need a 2-way glue pen or another type of glue in order to adhere it. So I'm using the Flirty Fuchsia embossing glitter, and I just covered the whole frame with it, and then I'm heating it. So this is another powder that it may be a little bit hard to tell when it's done, so you just kind of watch it in the light and wait for it to turn all shiny and no powdery sections are left. This Flirty Fuchsia glittery embossed frame looks really cool, and I can't wait to add it to the card. But first, I thought, I think this needs some more splatters. So I grabbed my Tambi Starry Colors palette. This is watercolor, and it's all glittery and shimmery. And so I'm using the white gold. I just added some water to that little palette there, mixed it around with my paintbrush, got it really wet, and then just flicked that white gold shimmer onto my card. And then I'm going to grab my Doris adhesive foam strips And one thing I like about these is they're really thin. I don't have to cut them down, and they're a nice height. So I'm going to add those all the way around my circle. And now it's time to start assembling the card. So I'm taking this watercolor piece, technique piece, and adding a bunch of liquid glue. I want this to lay flat, so that's why I'm adding a little extra glue. And then I'm going to add it to my card front. Now, one mistake I made here is I have not added a sentiment yet. So I'm going to go a little risky here, and I'm going to add it now. I want to make sure I get it in the right place, so I'm going to take that circle that I used for the frame, and I'm just going to add it to the card front. This is the smallest one, so it kind of represents the inside of that frame. And I'm adding the little heart where I think it's going to go, and then the sentiment, so I can be sure of good placement. I'm using the Love Ya and my Midnight ink. Since this is watercolor cardstock and it's a little bit textured, it may take a couple times stamping your sentiment to make sure it's nice and smooth and full and crisp and solid. So that's why it's a great idea to use your MISTI when stamping on watercolor cardstock. So the heart, I want it to pop up as well, just like the frame does. So I'm adding some foam tape to it, and I will add it right to the front of the card. And I added the foam tape on either side of where my frame was going to hit, so that everything lays flat. And then, of course, I'm going to finish it off with sequins. So my Crater Lake sequins, which are a sparkling clear, they come in different sizes, and some of the sequins have little holes in the middle and some are discs, and they are absolutely gorgeous. They go with just about every single project you can imagine. So I'm adding a bunch on here. So it gives actually a little bit of a kind of idea of a shaker card there, because I could have easily made this a shaker card. I really love how this card came out. I hope you guys enjoyed all of these projects using heat embossing as an accent. So we used it on the coffee cups, we used it on the frame, and we used it on the sentiment die. I hope you're inspired today, and I really appreciate you joining me. Leave a comment. Let me know which card is your favorite. When you interact with our videos, it tells YouTube that you love our content, and we so appreciate that because it helps us get the word out about our brand even more, and we have more friends to share in the fun. So thank you so much. I will see you again very soon.